Hi there, my name is Owen Walters. Today we're going to be taking a look at making this in After Effects. Alright, so this is actually pretty simple. It's just a couple layer of noise, some distortion and glows, and finally optical flares here, and I'll be showing you how to do it both with the third-party plugins I recommend, but also some workarounds without. I think it looks pretty good either way. I just think it looks a little bit nicer if you own Red Giant Universe and optical flares. But again, showing you both ways. So we're going to start out with a comp that's 1000 by 1000 pixels. Duration will be 10 seconds here, and we'll just call this Portal. And let's go ahead and reset my workspace to something a little bit more familiar. I like to have a very interesting workspace, and I will go ahead and take this and drag this over here just because I like to have as much visible as possible. So we're just going to have all this open. Go ahead, first things first, create a new solid. Call this our noise solid. And from here, if you have a giant universe, you'll be dragging down fractal background. Now we're going to be changing a few settings from this default. First, of course, we're going to be changing the loop duration to 10, the length of the comp, and that'll make it so we can have this portal on as long as we want here. Next, we're going to be keyframing the rotation, and for that, actually, we're going to go ahead and browse preset, hit outlines, and that'll get us started, because that changes the angle. So here we can use the modified angle, and just go ahead and do an even 3 rotations over time here. So now we have this, and it's looking much closer, but the colors aren't quite right. So what I have here is we can unfold this color map, change this black to more of a dark green, change this blue here to more of a light green, and we'll keep this white just the way that it is. And so here we have a pretty decent base texture. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you the rest of the steps. Let's go ahead and make this fall off background here. We'll be using a linear wipe, transition linear wipe to 0, and somewhere right around here maybe, we'll just feather this out, set this opacity to maybe 75, and now we have some nice fall off. And this doesn't make quite much sense now, but once we get into the distortion, you'll see why we want that here. If you don't own this plugin, and I highly recommend you get all of Red Giant Universe, it's well worth the money. But if you simply don't have that right now, I would recommend just creating a new solid for fractal noise, or we'll reuse our noise solid here just to keep our projects file small. And I'll go ahead and apply noise and grain fractal noise. From here, we'll just change this from basic to smeary. We'll invert it so that we get sort of those lines. Transform it up. We're scaling this up here. Turn the complexity up just about as high as it'll go. Turning up the contrast here and the brightness down, just because we want sort of those little swirlies like we have on the original noise. We want that sort of big swirly effect. Maybe even offset this here. Just find what looks the most like what we want. And from here, keyframe the rotation, again 3, and this one doesn't auto-animate the evolution, but that's okay. Keyframe the evolution here, and have it go forward 1, but then while we're also in the evolution options, we're going to go ahead and hit cycle evolution. So now as you can see, we have that. And I don't like that the rotation doesn't move with that, so maybe we'll just hit reset here and instead play with the random seed to find a value that I like. That's the one. So now we have this spinning and moving around. That's perfect. And what I'd also like is some smaller detail. So we'll go ahead and scale this down as well. Maybe here. And that'll create this sort of layered effect that we're looking for a bit more easily. And finally, to both of these, I'll just apply a tint, color correction, tint, with that same 2 colors we had before. And copy paste that here. And that'll get us this, but it's still missing something. And that something is these little white dots here. So from there we can duplicate this again, delete that tint, jack up the contrast even more. Let's go ahead and so like this, turn the opacity back up to 100%, maybe even uninvert, so that we can take the brightness down, contrast up. That's pretty good, because what we'll be doing here as well is taking a Gaussian blur and just getting the general roundness of it, right? Then we'll go to stylize threshold to sort of de-blur it and allow us to fine-tune the amount of dots. And then we're going to blur it once more to simulate that glow look without a lot of the time it takes to simulate actual glows for each of these. I actually think it looks a bit nicer to just use a Gaussian blur. It's a bit more smooth. And we'll just, since that is at 100% now, we'll just screen these on here. And now we have this, which is sort of similar. I don't think it looks quite as good, quite as nice as this. So I'm just going to keep this up. But again, if you don't have Universe, you can do what you want. Either way, we're going to take all of these layers and pre-compose them. Call this texture loop. Now here's where it gets interesting. Here is where what we want is a seamless texture. Because what we'll be doing is going to distort polar coordinates, rect to polar, and you'll see there's this big ugly seam right here. So we're going to want to get rid of that. And the way to do that is going to distort and actually use offset. And what that'll allow me to do is to set this to 0. And there's that seam right there. We just used 2 highly feathered linear whites to just sort of center in on it while not overlapping with it at all. We'll just set this to 40, and we'll duplicate this from the other direction. Channel invert, set this to alpha, and what this will do is create a hole right where that seam is that we can drop the original in using CC composite, drop it behind with that alpha blend, and because of the feathering here, it's dropping the original that isn't offset. So now we've got that seam sort of lined up, and it looks kind of interesting. We might make it look a little bit more natural by just easing up on that transition here. There we go. And once we warp that, that'll be sort of part of the layers of the effect. So let's do what we promised. Go in here, distort, and polar coordinates, rectipolar, 100%. And you can see we have kind of the portal already starting to shape up, but it doesn't look quite right, and there's a couple reasons for that. We need this more portal shape, and we'll just get that by resizing this. And then we'll get part of that by using turbulent displace with the size set to 50, the amount up. And I just have, the only reason I have that value there memorized is because I've done this before. You'll find, like anything, building a project from scratch requires trial and error. There's no magic value for any effect. More or less, you'll find a lot of times trial and error is the best solution. And speaking of trial and error, I found that hitting the evolution for 1 isn't enough here. Or actually, by the end of this comp, we're going to want 3 rotations. And we can go into evolution options, cycle it, set this to 3 as well. And since these match, this will still continue to loop. Now I like that this is dark in the middle here, but I want a definite sort of light border here, so you can see it starts out light and goes dark. And the way you can do that is by right-clicking, Layer Styles, Inner Glow. Take that inner glow, set it to this, and turn the size way, way up. .100% here. Maybe even linear dodge, which is more like the and. And now we've got ourselves a decent looping portal. I actually find I don't like this matching what's in there already quite as much, so we'll make this even a little bit brighter. Pass it down. Definitely brighter. That's got those bright edges. That's a little bit nicer. I think I just forgot to say the value I had on the glow. That's okay. It's all about experimentation. And you can kind of see where it's blending those edges here, but it certainly looks pretty nice. And the distortion helps hide those seams. Now, I mean, we could work on those a little bit more, or we could call it a day, and that's exactly what I intend to do. So now that we have this, we'll pre-comp this, move all attributes, call this portal loop, and from here we can actually expand the composition to about 13 seconds. Move this to maybe the 2-second mark. And we're actually going to create 2 copies of this. One that starts here, and because it loops, you actually cannot detect the cut between the two, and that's intentional. So we're going to have a copy here, and a copy. We're going to have a copy here and a copy here. And these will be our in and out points. So this is our loop point, this is our in point, and this is our out point. So I'm going to do something a little bit different and chop this off right here. And you'll see why in a second. We're going to start with two effects, transform, which I'll get back to in a second, and CC flow motion. Now you'll find if you turn on finer controls and turn off tile edges here, you just place this one point right in the center. 500, 500. Now I got these values is just by taking our comp width and height and putting them in half to get them right in the dead center. So once I have this right in the dead center, and I have tile edges off, I can turn this up. You can see the portal kind of sucks into itself right up until here, where there's sort of a quirk of the distort, and I'm not sure I entirely like that, which is what the transform is for. But I'll show you in a second. So we're going to start by keyframing this at 500 and having it go all the way down to 0 for this. I'm worried looking at this, so there's one frame of overlap. So we'll just take those keyframes and shift them over. There we go, fix that. Everyone's human, everyone makes mistakes. Now next what I'm going to do is take this, and I like to actually have this animation linked up. So what I'm going to do is Alt-click on the scale, turn it to this, and type a little expression. First thing I'm doing is putting this in parentheses and dividing it by 5. And so what that's saying is, take this, divide it by 5, that makes it 100. But since we don't want it to start at 100 scale, we want it to start at 0, we'll take 100 minus this. So right now it's 100 minus 100, works its way up. Now a quirk of this method is that now it stays in that center area for a very long time, for more than half of it. And that's not what we want. We want it to sort of expand out evenly. So the best way to do this is make it start moving really fast here and curve the velocity down to 0 here. So we'll change the keyframe velocity, type 0 in there, and turn up its influence to 100%, so that if you look in the chart here, you can see it starts out moving really fast and slows down over time. And that's what will give us that nice sort of exponential effect. And we can make that even more obvious by really making sure there's 0 influence on this guy. There we go. And this needs a little more, I'll just say, it needs a little more flare. So we're going to create one more new solid here. OF, optical flares. And we'll just tack on Video Copilot optical flares. Put that right in the center. Go into options here. And I am going to pick just whatever strikes my fancy. I'm thinking Green Goblin here. Set that scale to 50% as well. And just keyframe the brightness. So we'll go ahead and set this to on transparent. And set this to screen. And so right as it really starts taking shape right around here, keyframe this at 100. Keyframe it at 0, maybe at the start of the comp. And then now that it's fully formed, it gets a 0 here. So what we have with that is this. That doesn't look quite right. Maybe something like this. Alright, so you probably see me come back from just a horrible jump cut. What I've done is I've moved the start here to about 15 frames in, keeping in mind that the actual start of the turn on animation is a second, so almost a second, and almost 1 second and 15 frames, and it goes to full velocity, and then it turns back off. And then I just made this ease out in the same way ours eases in over here by just setting that velocity to 0. So now it kind of bursts on and then fades off with this. Excellent. So now all we have to do is take these two effects, copy them, paste them onto our out. Now, since this is still set to on, we just have to keyframe assistant, time reverse keyframes. And since everything's linked up to those two keyframes, it just sucks right back into itself. Excellent. So there we go. That's looking really good. Now, in case you don't have optical flares, I can show you how to do this using the standard lens flare plugin. Let's create a new solid LF, and we'll just generate lens flare 500, 500. I like this guy, and same sort of deal. From this 0, 0. Now, unfortunately, or rather, fortunately, I guess, this one already kind of scales exponentially, so I'm not sure we're going to be using the same easing, but we can go ahead and try it just as a template here. That's something. So then we're going to go and use keying extract, and that'll sort of help us simulate the render on transparent that optical flares has the ability to do. And I'll feather this a little bit, but we really just want to get in here. And we'll set this to screen as well, and that'll help. Yeah, so really just the only time it's going to look absolutely horrible is right here. But that's okay, because we're about to do so much more to it. We're going to go into color correction, curves, put this down, move this up, take these reds out of the equation, put these greens back into the equation, you know. Alright, we're just going to add generate CC light burst 0.5. It's already at 500, 500, so we just have to turn that intensity up. Maybe the ray length a little bit. Beautiful. And just and well, maybe the intensity down a little bit. Yeah, something like that. So if you've done everything right with that lens flare, it should look something like this. And that's alright. Now obviously I'm not great with the standard lens flare, it's not my go-to tool, so if you have something better, feel free to do it, but that's my standard approach. Alright, so I've gone ahead and rendered this out using both the standard lens flare and the built-in fractal noise. So if you have no third-party plugins, here's what your project could look like. Alright, that's all for this tutorial. Once again, my name is Owen Walters. If you have any questions, any suggestions for new tutorials, please feel free to leave a note in the comments below or hit me up on Reddit. I'm always happy to answer messages. I usually check out once a day. Thank you very much for watching.